Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Agency, Morals, and the Mind. My name is Mattia Gallotti. I'm a philosopher in the School of Advanced Study, and among other things, I look after the Human Mind Project. Thank you all for joining us today and tomorrow, and a warm welcome to our speakers. I believe some of them are already here with us, sitting in the room. So today and tomorrow we'll be discussing issues, aspects of agency and morality. So the sense that we are, the feeling that we are in control of our actions, and of course the meaning and the science of morality. Now if you go through the abstracts in the event program, you will see that the list of topics is quite diverse and very long. So we'll be talking about conflict, cooperation, volition, moral decision making, and the possibility of moral progress. We'll be discussing these issues in the spirit of the Human Mind Project. So I thought I'd say a few words about what we do, especially for those of you who are not familiar with our activity. Now, despite the name, we usually present the Human Project as a research program. So it's a bit of a cluster of different things, different activities. And what we try to do is to encourage a truly, genuinely interdisciplinary dialogue on issues about the mind, like, for instance, agency and morality. And we think that, in a way, we should make an effort and integrate, especially the arts and humanities, into a sort of rich and challenging picture that comes from the sciences, especially the neurosciences. So this effort, in a way, is part of the DNA of the Human Mind Project. I guess the best way to show what we do is to draw your attention to the website. Anna Hopkins, our project officer, is helping me showing you exactly where to go and where to find the interesting stuff. So for example, if you go on the website and you see the so-called grand challenges over there, well, that's really the name of the game. By grand challenges, we mean the key questions facing the study of the mind nowadays. And that's possibly the overarching goal of the Human Mind Project, to identify the questions, the crucial, the critical questions in the study of the mind. One thing that I want to stress here, although it's called Grand Challenge Exercise, it's not just an academic thing, and that's very important to say. I think it's about all of us, including you, any person interested in the mind, contributing to the debate, participating in the ongoing debate about the nature of the mind. So you're all invited to contribute. How? Well, by logging into the system, the forum, and if you like, posting your comments. So how do you do it? If you go on the home page, again, one back, well, this is the home page of the Grand Challenge. You'll see that there are different sections. You'll find lots of resources in there. You'll find videos, comments, Q&As with speakers, with experts. You'll find links to external resources. And then again, if you're on the home page of the Grand Challenges and you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll find questions, key questions, that we have identified so far, for instance, at our events. It's general questions about the mind, the meaning of the mind, and then we thought we will launch the event today with a provocative question. Is there such a thing as moral progress? And I hope many more questions will come out of the discussion today and tomorrow. And then, of course, we have questions on the self, storytelling, emotion, memory, and so on and so forth. So how do you contribute? Well, if you click on the image that you like, the question interests you, then you'll be redirected to a page where you can log into the system and post your comment. Now, there will be at least a couple of working iPads in the room where refreshments will be served. Feel free to grab one, play with it. If you want to leave a comment, please do. I mean, that's really important for us. Tell us what you think the key questions in the study of the mind are, and that's a bit like the spirit, the DNA of the Human Mind Project. If you have any specific question on how to do it, I'm not the right person to ask it, but Matt Fieldwork, our digital manager, is, so feel free to approach Matt and to ask him. I really do encourage you to take part in the grand challenges. Again, the Human Mind Project obviously is hosted in the School of Advanced Study, but it's for everybody, and we want to reach out really to everybody and hear what they have to say about the mind. In the same spirit, if you have a look at the program, we will end tomorrow in the late afternoon with a roundtable discussion chaired by Colin Blackmore, who is sitting here as leader of the Human Mind Project. The roundtable will be on the future of research, again on agency and morality, and it's another kind of open consultation where everybody is invited to contribute. You already know that refreshments will be served in the room down the corridor. There will be a one reception for everybody tonight at 6. And if you want to tweet us during the event at Human Mind Debate using this hashtag. Okay? Now, last but not least, many people have been involved in the organization of this event. The list is very long. I want to thank all of them. In particular, I'd like to mention, Sofia Policalzi, our first postdoctoral researcher. Sofia joined the team of the project a few months ago. Her input and contribution to this event were absolutely crucial. And of course, Anna Hopkins. Some of you have received emails from Anna. Anna is our project officer, and she works, of course, on events with me. All right, so I think we are ready for the first session of the event on morals, culture, and society. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. Scott Atran, Director of Research at CNRS in Paris, among many things, Special Advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Catherine Wilson, an University Professor of Philosophy at the University of Warwick, and Emma Flynn, Professor of Developmental and Comparative Psychology at Durham University. Now, the rules of the game are the following. They will speak for about 30 minutes, and then they will probably take 1 or 2 burning questions, but the idea is to have a joint Q&A after the coffee break, so after the talks. I will probably invite Scott, Catherine, and Emma to sit there with me, and we will engage in a sort of collective discussion. All right, so I think I've covered everything. Enjoy. Thank you.
All right, I wasn't terribly sure exactly what to talk about, so I decided to talk about my current interest. And my current interest is trying to understand the role of the Islamic State and those who combat it in world history, and try to bring some general lessons to that study. One of the biggest problems, of course, is, so I'm an anthropologist. So I go out in the field and I work with people and study people, but I've brought together experimental psychologists, biologists, linguists with me, former military guys, generals, former deputy assistant to the president for national security, all come with me into the field. And we run experiments now on the front lines in Iraq and Syria with members of the Islamic State that we can get to capture if they're still alive. and those opposing them, like the PKK, the Peshmerga, the Iraqi army, the Sunni militia, and the Shia militia. And the reason is because the President of the United States, President Obama, back in September 2014, said that the greatest error in the United States policy towards the Islamic State was that we underestimated the ability of the Islamic State to fight, we overestimated the ability of the Iraqi army to fight, but a will to fight is an imponderable. And so we decided that we'd go out on the front lines and find out whether or not it's imponderable or not. The idea is not only to understand the Islamic State and what motivates it, but actually what got human beings out of the caves and what drove human history. What kind of revolutionary fervor, what kind of willingness to sacrifice, what kind of transcendental ideas have brought us to the present live stage, and where might we be going? Small questions. So, you know, this is our team. As I said, our team includes a hodgepodge of people, from people who worked at the White House, to Lord Alderdice, who was the convener in the House of Lords, to Robert Axelrod, first political scientist ever to win the Medal of Science, Presidential Medal of Science, and a whole bunch of other people you may or may not recognize. General Doug Stone, who was Petraeus's assistant, deputy commander of the Iraqi, the multinational forces in Iraq, Navajo Indian, very good at dealing with tribes. And we work on a hypothesis, which I sort of developed some years ago when I was briefing the National Security Council, called the devoted actor hypothesis. The idea is that most of the strategy of our political leaders, especially since World War II, have been based on rational active paradigms. The idea is, well, you all know what it is, about maximizing utility, risks and rewards, costs and consequences, outlays and outcomes. And the devoted actor hypothesis is meant to explain what I think, or to try to explain, or at least add to explanations of what's driving current conflicts in the world and what has driven revolutionary movements across history. And very simply put, when sacred values, as when land becomes holy land or law becomes hallowed, become embedded in fused social groups. These are groups where you bond totally with members of your group and they become your one and only reference group. We have many identities, many hats we put on. We may be Manchester United fans or Arsenal fans, or we may be policemen or university academics or whatever. But once you're fused in the group, you have one and only one identity, and you're not only willing to sacrifice for everyone in that group, but you become collectively empowered and you're willing to take on impossible projects. And when these two conditions are met, and I'm going to try to show you that these can be experimentally demonstrated, when they're met, members of these value-driven groups become willing to collectively defend or advance those values through costly sacrifices and extreme actions. Now, sometimes we test these things in the laboratory or online with college students. It's mostly worthless, but at least we can find out what kinds of questions can make sense. And we have to change drastically what a costly sacrifice is on the front lines, because everybody's dying and fighting, and people are fighting with no limbs. Some people have been wounded really, literally 15 times in just a few years. And so we have to ratchet it up. Are you willing to torture? Are you willing to dismember people? Are you willing to do all sorts of things to increase the variance? So what we consider costly sacrifices varies greatly with the population we're dealing with. So one of the things that have always interested me was a statement from Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, that human beings are motivated by the privilege of absurdity to which no creature is subject, but man only. And in fact, if we think about it, transcendental ideas, especially religious ideas, but also the isms, the great ideological isms that have dominated human history since the French Revolution, are inherently absurd ideas. Take the notion of human rights, for example. Human rights is something everybody accepts as natural. In fact, they're called providential or natural. Of course, nothing can be further from the truth. Human beings have had basically their bodies and minds for between 100 and 200,000 years, and for 99.9% of that time, cannibalism, infanticide, murder, oppression of minorities, subjugation of women, all the horrible things you could think of were pro forma, and then a bunch of intellectuals in the mid-18th century decided everybody's equal, which is patently absurd, and that everybody has natural rights with which they're endowed, and they initiated revolutions and social engineering on a massive scale because Europeans dominated the world, and so now we accept it, so they've made it real. But that's the kind of ideas that I'm interested in, apparently absurd ideas that we can make real to the extent possible. In this context, the Islamic State is not at all a terrorist group. It is a revolutionary group of classical proportions. If you think about the Islamic State, what it did in 18 months, it had been, from the surge, you know, from the captured computers, it had lost 80% of its foot soldiers, 10 to 15 of its high-value targets were killed every month consecutively for 15 months. They had lost all their territory, and then they sought safe haven in Syria. They were the best organized of all, paying martyrs, families in those between years. And when they had the chance to take hold in Syria, of course they did. They entered Iraq again to build oil for smuggling routes. And in 18 months, an organization that didn't exist was able to conquer an area the size of the United Kingdom and rule millions of people. And doing it fairly efficiently. I mean, His Majesty's Daesh task force, the Islamic State task force, even in January, was saying that the standard of living in places like Mosul was actually higher than it was before the Islamic State took over. And of course, in the Muslim world, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, it is the only discourse that that's around. There's nothing to compete with it. That doesn't mean that people support it. Overwhelming majority of people don't support it. It's the only thing around. Why has it taken hold? Why has it brought in people from 100 nations to build the largest volunteer fighting force since World War II? And why was it able to make such advances in such a relatively short time? With nothing, right? They've got 60 nations against it, with the mightiest air forces in the world, and they've got virtually nothing, and yet they've managed to resist. And so, on the front, why we go to the front lines is, first, in social science, one of the biggest problems is between stated willingness to do something and actual willingness to do something. So when a student says, well, you know, stated willingness to make costly sacrifices or to fight and die, well, that's not very meaningful. But on the front lines, it's very meaningful. And so one of the things that we do on the front lines is try to eliminate that gap. So let me just go back to Darwin for a moment. In The Descent of Man, how did he define morality? We tend to define morality in terms of distributed justice, Rawlsian type notions of what is just and right, fairness, things like that. Well, that's not at all what people like Darwin meant, and it's probably not what most people mean by morality or did until recently. He called it the spirit of patriotism, fidelity, obedience, courage, and sympathy, with which winning groups are better endowed than humans in history's spiraling competition for survival and dominance. It is a non-rational commitment from at least some of its members to action that drives success independent or all out of proportion of expected rational incomes. And he was very puzzled over heroism and martyrdom in the Descent of Man. In the Origin of Species, he basically said, well, people do things, or all creatures do things, basically for self-interest, or for the genetic interests of their families. But heroism and martyrdom posed a problem because people were sacrificing themselves not for the genetic fitness of the family, even knowing that their groups would lose in the long run. And he asked this question. He wrote to Wallace, the co-discoverer of the theory of evolution, what do you think about it? And Wallace responded, the special faculties we have been discussing clearly point to the existence in man of something which is not derived from its animal progenitors, something which we may best refer to as being of a spiritual essence, beyond all explanation by matter, its laws and forces. Needless to say, Darwin wasn't very happy with the answer. He responded to Wallace, I hope you have not murdered too completely your own child and mine, meaning the theory of evolution. But within evolutionary theory, even to this day, the notion of this power of absurdity of transcendental ideas is not really explained. So what is religion in this? Well, I'm not going to discuss what religion is, but I'm going to discuss its role in war and in peace. So religion is basically a neutral vessel, as I think about it, in which these transcendental ideas take effect and mobilize people for group efforts. And they can be mobilized for civil rights movements and human rights movements to end slavery, or they can be mobilized for things like the Islamic State, or to conquer and kill people. It's a multiplier effect, basically. If you look at the BBC, this is just a little aside about neo-atheists, people like Dawkins, my favorite nemesis, and others. Only about 7% of the wars in human history have a religious signature of any appreciable extent. But it is true that once wars do become embedded in religious ideas, they tend to last a very long time and become intractable. And our studies suggest that costly and seemingly arbitrary ritual commitment to logically and empirically inscrutable beliefs actually deepens trust. This is one of the great paradoxes of human history. The more absurd the ideas are, sort of crazier from an empirical and logical point of view the rituals are, the more people trust one another. It is the greatest binder of human beings. And by contrast, fully reasoned social contracts that regulate individual interests to share costs and benefits of cooperation are more liable to collapse. You just do backwards induction. If there's a better idea down the line, there's a more better conventional way out of it, then you defect as soon as you can. So basically, social contracts don't last all that long in human history, while religious societies generally do. Or ideological societies that are basically the same. Take the nation. The nation is an inherently religious concept, sort of a crazy notion of anonymous strangers bound by one another, willing to sacrifice unto the death, with many of the same religious trappings. Songs and anthems and sways and power and prostration and sacrifice for your bodies and anthems and all those sorts of things. All right, now let's go a little bit into what I actually mean by things like sacred values. So I have no prospect theory of sacred values, but I do have many of the descriptive conditions which we've been able to verify again and again across the world, in fact across 6 continents in very varied experimental setups, from front lines of war to classrooms. So sacred values are insensitive to quantity. It doesn't matter if you kill one person or 1,000 person, God will love you too, all the same, or if you sacrifice just yourself or 1,000 people. They're immune to material trade-offs. In fact, there's a backfire effect. The more you offer material incentives or disincentives, the more people become outraged and hunker down to their values. They're insensitive to temporal and spatial discount. In fact, they violate all the conditions, all the axioms of standard utility theory. So, for example, if an event happens distantly in time and space, for example, the flight of Muhammad, or Moses' crossing the Sinai, or the battle, or the American Revolution, events like this are more important than events that are closer in time and space. Also happenings, even that are far away, but happen to be centrally located in terms of the symbolic place, are much more important. So, for example, I was in Sulawesi back in 2004, 2005, which was then the sort of jihadi capital of the world. Jihadis coming in from all over the place to fight the Christians in Sulawesi. This is an island between Borneo and New Guinea. People there are literally recountable 3 generations ago. None had ever gone out of Sulawesi. All were willing to go and fight and die in Afghanistan and Palestine. And we're trying to get there. Now, how did that happen? Well, that's a long story about this massive media-driven political awakening, but it happened in part because simply the power of ideas to mobilize people. Oh, there are more things. Sacred values blind people to exit strategy. They have privilege linked to emotions, and they have distinct moral processing signatures in the brain, which I talked about briefly. So the first studies we did were in Iran and Palestine, both for settlers and refugees. So we would do a between subjects design, for example. We'd say to people, well, you couldn't, we'd start off interviewing leaders. For example, I went to Mr. Mashal, the head of, first I went to Mr. Netanyahu, and I said, so what do you want to know from Mr. Assad and Mr. Mashal? Well, he gave me a set of things he wanted to know from Mr. Assad, which is irrelevant to this thing, but he said, for Mr. Mashal, I have only one question. Would he ever recognize the right of the Jewish people to be here in the Middle East? So I went to Mr. Mashal, and I said, well, and he sort of went, we've been in prison 70 years, and our jailers want us to recognize them. Well, let us out of jail, and we'll talk about it. And then I asked him, so what would you want from the Israeli people? And he said an apology. An apology for what they did to us in 1948. Would they apologize and recognize the harm they've done in the dispossession of it and the dislocation of the Palestinian people? These were interesting responses. These were responses that were very heartfelt on both sides, which we find in again and again. And after talking to the leaders, you can't really use studies with leaders because it's within subjects, and of course, when you ask a question, it prejudices the next question. So then what we do, we went to the general populations and we did it between subjects design. So the first group is like you're talking to one person, right? The first group of people, we said, we did this to settlers 4 days before they were withdrawn from Gaza, and we did this to Palestinians all around, thousands of them actually. And we asked the three groups these questions. For example, would you be willing to give up the right of return in exchange for a peace settlement in which you would share Jerusalem? And the reaction was about 80% no. Even though we had polls from Khalid Shikaki, who's also a part of our team, showing that only 8% of the refugees would ever want to go back to Israel in the first place. But it is a sacred right. Now we asked the second group the exact same question, except we put in a material rider. Would you be willing to give up the right of return for a permanent peace, sharing Jerusalem, plus we give every Palestinian family the equivalent of $10,000. And we did this in euros, and we did this for the entire Palestinian community, different versions of it. And support for suicide terrorism went up to 90%. And people became even angrier. And then the third group, we gave the exact same question, except the rider, instead of a material incentive, was, and the Israeli people apologized for what they did in 48. And we were very careful to say that doesn't mean that they're going to allow anybody to resettle, but they would apologize. And support for suicide bombings, violence, and willingness to accept peace increased in there.
So the increase when you put the increase, they were willing to apologize?
Yes, significant.
Support for terrorism increased.
No, they decreased. Sorry, decreasing. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry,
that's the,
yeah. We did the same thing with Iran for the nuclear weapons. We've done it in all sorts of places. Anyway, this is all there in places like science and pursuing international governments. Okay, I'm not going to go through the stats. Now, people would say to us, okay, this is what people say. But is it real? Would they really go through with this? Is this what they really would do? And also, in peace negotiations, which we were involved in at the time, we were trying to establish a ceasefire with Hamas. People would say, look, these are all ultimate questions. These can't be handled now. Let's do small things. We'll talk about water rights, let's making sure people's families can eat. And basically, our conclusion was that when sacred values are at stake, this is precisely the wrong way to go. This will make conflicts intractable and last forever. And they will be rejected. And people will become angrier and angrier, which is exactly what happens. This is just a very interesting thing. What we did with this group, this is Lashkar Taiba. These are an Al-Qaeda affiliate, which we just did a bunch of experiments, fMRIs with. And what we show is that when sacred values are involved in willingness to fight, people are much less deliberative in their decisions. And we found this again and again. Of course, we found it in the classroom too, but it was interesting that we found it quite significantly with an actual radical Islamic group associated with Al-Qaeda. In fact, this is the first study ever of willingness to fight, period, and certainly the first study of a radical Islamic group in an fMRI machine. Okay, so let's look at the jihad, which is considered terrorism. In our propaganda, of course, it is considered terrible and terrorist, just like the National Socialist movement was. But in reality, it's quite a joyful movement. It's a happy movement. It's a movement that motivates people. If you would go to places like Mosul and Raqqa, you'd see young people from all over the world, men and women, in a joyous movement, very much like the Hitler movement, which was also an extremely joyous revolutionary movement. There's no brainwashing involved. That we find, especially parents, when they're told that their kids have gone to the Islamic State, usually they have no idea that their kids have gone. Well over 80% of cases, there wasn't the slightest hint. People talk about the clash of civilizations. It's quite the opposite. It's a collapse of territorial cultures, so that the vertical lines of communication between elders and youngers have been sundered, and young people are hooking up horizontally over the internet worldwide, making new cultures in very narrow bandwidths, and the parents haven't the slightest idea what's going on. And then they can wind up with the Islamic State, and the parents come back and say, oh, my kid was brainwashed. Well, brainwashing is a fiction of the Korean War, when 100 Brits and Americans didn't want to come back from North Korea. And so a book was written, The Manchurian Candidate, about how these Chinese social engineering wizards using Pavlovian techniques were able to wash the brains of these Americans. Of course, that never happened. And that, again, has become part of an urban legend, but forget about it. Another one of the things that people often talk about is nihilism. These are nihilists. Well, again, quite the opposite is true. They accuse the West, especially, of lacking moral metaphysics of any kind. In fact, they talk about moral metaphysics. Say there are no red lines. There are no moral red lines in our culture. When I talk to young women who join the Islamic State, I get some young teenage women who join because the Islamic State will offer them 1,000 likes with their post-Islamic State propaganda. And so some people will join for that reason. But a lot of them will join because they want red lines. They don't want a genderless, cultureless society. They want to know that men are men and women are women, and an Arab is an Arab and can live with dignity, and that's why they join. So again, it offers something to people. In fact, it offers something to a lot of people. Now, in our preferred world of liberal democracy, tolerance, diversity, distributive justice, motions against violence, especially extreme forms of mass bloodshed, are considered pathological or evil expressions of human nature gone awry. Well, in fact, for most of human history, it is considered the most honorable thing in your society to fight for your society and kill for your society. And you have to be morally motivated. For without a claim to moral virtue, it's virtually impossible to endeavor to kill a large number of people, innocent of direct harm to others. So how many times in human history have there been mass killings of apparently innocent civilians? Well, basically, that wouldn't have happened unless they were morally motivated to do so. Now, a lot of people get very angry when I say, oh, well, the Nazis were an extremely moral society, as is the Islamic State, but they certainly were. This anecdote when Hitler, after the Anschluss, the Jews of Vienna came to the Reich and said, well, we don't want to be, this including the Wittgenstein family, we don't want to be included in this list of Jews, and we're willing to pay the Reich a considerable sum of billions of Deutschmarks if we can not be classed that way. Now, this is 1938, right? When the Wehrmacht was telling Hitler we need at least 3 more years to prepare for a war on one front, much less 2 fronts. So Hitler had his genealogists go through each and every case of 12,000, and he accepted 6 and lost the money. Well, that's a crazy idea, but I think it shows basically the sincerity of his moral conviction, however crazy it seems to us. So, assessing the will to fight. How do we know if this will is true? If we really are committed to fighting to the death. And again, a main problem which we found in social science studies and philosophizing is that people have very little experience in the field of people who actually do these things. It's not enough to talk to people who were once soldiers, who were once terrorists, who were once on the front lines, who were once leaders. The thing is to be in the thick of battle. You learn really more in 10 minutes than you do in 10 years of just sitting back about what is really going on in places like that. So that's why we do it. So here's where we're working. We've been working recently. This is the front lines of the Islamic State. This is Raqqa and Mosul between the Euphrates and the Tigris. The capitals, the joint capitals of the Islamic State. And we're up here, Kirkuk and Mahmud, which is where the current offensive is currently happening. We try to take Mosul, the second largest city in Iraq. And there's this is our team. There's Rich, that's Rich Davis, the one with the beard. He was a former director of terrorism prevention at the White House. He's now a professor. He's at Oxford and LSE. Lydia Wilson, she did her degree in history and philosophy of science with Nicholas Sardine. She's an intrepid field worker. She actually goes there with a violin to get into these camps. And Hoshan Waziri and others. This is what the front lines actually look like. It's like it's something out of the Middle Ages. I mean, the United States left the most sophisticated equipment in the world there. 3,500 kilometers of this kind. Consider how enormous the Islamic State is controlled of mudboards, in which each of these terrorists has about 18 soldiers, and they've been fighting continuously for 18 months. And here, I just wanted to give you an idea of what our field setup was. Well, great. How do I really take this? This did it to me again. Well, mail. Well, look like this. This always happens when I'm using Mac. So you see those are cards, you know, and those are just our field workers, and we're working with soldiers in their barracks on the front lines in this place. Okay? Anyway, just to give you a feel for what's it like. This is with the PKK. They are actually the best fighters along with the Islamic State. They're the only ones who didn't retreat in August 2014 when the Islamic State was about to take over on August the 6th. Barzani, the president of Kurdish Regional Republic, got in touch with General Lloyds and Allen, who took Obama out of a restaurant in Washington with his wife and said, you've got 90 minutes before Kurdistan falls and perhaps all of Iraq. And so they launched massive airstrikes, and since then the front lines were stable, hadn't moved at all until March of this year, when the Iraqi army and the Kurds, under American advisors, German and British and French, started a massive offensive towards Mahmud. Caliphate. 5 minutes, you gotta be kidding. Okay. I'm joking. By the way, these slides are more for me than for you. They keep me on track. Otherwise, I'd go off in crazy directions. Anyway, the caliphate is not a crazy or delusional ideal. I was with, for example, in Barcelona recently with an imam who runs interfaith dialogue with Christians and Jews. They visit synagogues, and on Christmas they go to churches, and they talk. And he said to me quite revealingly, the caliphate has always been in our hearts, and always will be in our hearts. Now, we don't want the caliphate of the Islamic State, but it is here. We hope it can be something like a European Union of Muslim peoples, but it's back in our minds. And we don't like the Islamic State, and we've never accepted al-Qaeda, but we were forgotten people here in Europe. They put us on the map. Oh, this is so let me just very briefly in the 4 minutes and 59 seconds I have left to tell you how the experiments are run. So this is a simple fusion experiment, okay? So we do it on the iPad too. You can take a circle and move it. This is me and the group. This is just the Islamic State. And they're not touching, then they're slightly overlapping, and then when they're fused, the me is entirely within the group. Well, this was first done in Libya with guerrillas, and the people who actually do the last one, they actually blacken it out, and they behave on every measure we know differently than all the other groups. So all the others, no matter how many you do, 10 or 100 or make it continuous, there's no real statistical difference. The only group that matters is this. So if you look at histograms, they look like that. Okay, so first thing we did was in two neighborhoods, in Tetuan and Casablanca. These two neighborhoods, that's the black ones, are Jama Mezouak in Tetuan, where the Madrid bombers came from, and many of the people who went to blow themselves up in Bakuba in Iraq, and the city movement in Casablanca, where many of the terrorist events of the first decade in Morocco occurred, and since then, of course, they've done massive urban renewal there. And we went into these two neighborhoods. This is just to show that they're much more radical than the rest of those cities. And this is what we found. What we found is when they're devoted to sacred values, in this case the Sharia of the Caliphate, okay, and they're fused with a group of family, a close group of family-like friends, okay, then their willingness to make costly sacrifices is maximum. And we find this again and again. When these two conditions interact, that is devotion to a sacred value and fusion with a group that incarnates those values, people are willing to fight unto the death. And of course, you can do all sorts of things like trolley problems or things like that, which are, I'm not really a fan of terminology, but we do that anyway. And you can show that the same effects happen. Let me go really fast. So, we went to we had an idea that the more people are fused and devoted to a sacred value, the more invincible they feel. And so they will rate themselves as physically very strong. This comes from evolutionary theory. You know, why little guys are willing to beat big guys or threaten big guys, and the big guys decide it's just not worth it and run off. So the stronger and stronger you get should correspond to the more you feel that you're fused with your group and you're tied to your value. And the enemy should appear weaker and weaker. Well, we went there, and the interesting thing was everybody was responding to this really nicely until we got to the Islamic State and the PKK. And they said, we don't want to respond to this question. We asked why. They said, because physical force doesn't matter. What matters is the spirit and the heart. So we used the same measure, but then we said, instead of manawiyya, instead of physical force, it's spiritual force. And we tested the two of them. And we find the spiritual force, perceptions of one's own spiritual force and of the other spiritual force are the best predictors of willingness to fight. And we found in Western Europe, among Western Europeans, the more people feel that the Islamic State is spiritually motivated and forceful, spiritually, not physically, the less likely they are to fight for the democratic values. It has a paralyzing effect. And this is running it with the Islamic State guys. This is where we did it on the iPod, and I'll just show you this. We're going to get there. This is an Islamic State prisoner. He's the guy who chose the mask. You know, just playing with the cards. Forget it, you can't see it. Wow. This is a Kurdish soldier. The interesting thing is you'll see him, he's raiding here. He's raiding here both the Islamic State and the Americans. So the one on the left is physical, and the one on the right is spiritual. So that's rather the opposite. So he ranks the Islamic State maximally physical, and now he's going to rank the Americans, for example. And we get the opposite. Physically very strong, spiritually middling. This, by the way, is the best predictor whether people will continue to fight. This is just willingness to make costly sacrifices to fight and die. It shows us that the Peshmerga are willing to fight and die more than the Iraqi army or the Sunni militia. I should say, let me just, two things before I conclude. One, so we were at a battle in late February called Kadila, which is about 10 kilometers west of Mahmour, between Mahmour and Mosul. And there were about 500 Arab Sunni militia and Peshmerga and the Iraqi army, American advisors and German advisors. And there were 90 and three groups of 30 Islamic State fighters in this village. At dawn, the offensive was launched. 52 of the Islamic State fighters died. There were about 20 suicide bombers in Ghamasi. These are specially trained to pierce their lungs. 7 of them blew themselves up to cover the retreat of the last 15. The Peshmerga, with the Iraqi army and the Sunni militia, who had outnumbered them 6-1, took the village. And they said to the Sunni Arabs who were there, these are your villages, you can take them. And the Arab Sunni said, no way, these guys are crazy. And they left, and the next day, the Islamic State walked in again. So, let me go back to something that George Orwell said in his review of Mein Kampf back in 1940. It's a one-page review, you can get it online. So the Atran Student Union, for example, had voted never to fight for democracy again. By the way, we do these studies on the West, and no one's willing to fight and die for democracy. They're not even willing to state it, much less do it. So it's very similar to the situation back then. Our values have sort of become tired. And Orwell says, okay, well, the Atran Student Union is not willing to fight for democracy again. And then he says, well, what is it about socialist societies, and to a more grudging extent, capitalist societies, are willing to offer their people avoidance of risk, ease, freedom from pain, hygiene, birth control, health care, in short, the good life. And our people are willing to do nothing and fight for none of these values. And why is it that Mr. Hitler is willing to offer his people danger, revolution, death, destruction, and 80 million people fall down at his feet? Because, Orwell says, Mr. Hitler has understood something very deep about human nature. Humans need, at least intermittently, a feeling of transcendence and self-sacrifice. Something, for example, which people in England felt for a time, at least during World War II. And without that, civilizations will fall, and others will rise. Now, the Germans were by far the best fighting forces in World War II. Usually, a unit with 30% destruction goes to entropy. In fact, that's the way the Israelis fought the Six-Day War. They would simply monitor losses, and when it hit 30%, they move on. Well, these units, especially units like the Waffen-SS, were willing to take more than 50% casualties. Other groups like the Lincoln Brigade, certain groups of the Confederacy, were also willing to accept these kinds of losses. What defeated the Germans was overwhelming military force. The Americans were outproducing the Germans 10-1 at the end of the war. The Germans simply couldn't replace their losses, and they were defeated. And no doubt this will happen to the Islamic State. But then what comes next? Well, one of the reasons Nazism is no longer with us, really as a major geopolitical force, is because it was a state with a national identity, in which that identity could be flipped. But such a thing does not exist in Syria and in Iraq, or even in places like Libya. Democracy took 150 years to develop in Europe. Elections were the last stage. You had to develop liberal institutions. In Europe, this actually occurred under Napoleon III, Bismarck, where things like legislative assemblies, right of religious worship, opposition press, workers' rights, workers' compensation, all were developed over a long period, over a century. And then elections occurred. The Americans came into Iraq and said, we're going to have elections, it's going to be democracy, hallelujah. Well, of course, all you had was a tyranny of the majority, which did the same thing to the minority that the minority had done to the majority for the previous 150 years. Now, the question is, what is going to happen in our society, and here's the last slide, today? How comes it that the values of liberal and open democracy increasingly appear to be losing ground to those of narrow nationalisms and radical Islam in a tacit alliance, southern European middle class? If there's been one finding, and I think there's only been one robust finding in political science, in the history of political science, and that is democracies cannot exist without a robust middle class, and cannot expand without that robust middle class expanding. Now, that's not happening anymore. In fact, there's pressure on both sides, shrinking. So this tacit alliance is doing things to Europe in similar ways to the hatchet job on Republican values by fascists and communists in the 20s and 30s. And for the future of liberal democracies, even beyond the threat from violent jihadis, that may be the core existential and moral issue of our time. And I think studying the Islamic State and what makes it so robust, even though it will be defeated militarily, is, I think, a great way to approach an answer to